Good evening and welcome to the Friends of West Barnes Library online author talk. My name's Sarah McAllister and I'm one of the friends of the West Barnes Library, and it's my job to introduce you to this evening. The library is now open 3 days a week for browsing, and the reservations and collections and audiobook services are all still up and running. If we were meeting in person, I would have welcomed you with a drink and some nibbles and Joy's famous cookies. But tonight, I hope you've had a chance to organise your own refreshments before the entertainment starts. Another of my duties, if we were meeting in person, would be to point out the fire exits. So if at any point this evening you can hear a fire alarm, it's actually in your house and you really do need to leave a bit sharpish. I have a couple of thank yous before we start. Firstly, to Karen Baker for the wonderful posters that she does for us for these events, and it really does make us look professional, and some of us need all the help we can get. Secondly, tonight, as always, huge thanks to Joy and Phil. Joy, who organises these events, and to her family, who are the tech team behind the scenes for these events. So thank you all. Now hand over to Joy.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Yeah, the tech team, it's been a few issues, which is why we're not on Facebook and YouTube. So sorry about that, but hopefully you've found us now on YouTube. So my name is Joy Kluver. I live locally to the library. It's sort of about a 5-minute walk from my house. And I'm a book blogger, and I can now say soon to be published author. So that will be next year. We'll talk about that next year. But in the meantime, I want to introduce you to Will Dean and Johana Gustawsson. And the brilliant thing is, guys, is that we're only 7 months and 1 day late for our event back in March. So this is our postponed event, but we've managed to get here. So let me tell you a little bit more about our authors. So let's start with Will. Will Dean grew up in the East Midlands, living in 9 different villages before the age of 18. That's quite some going there. Having studied law at the LSE and working many varied jobs in London, he settled in rural Sweden with his wife. He built a wooden house in a boggy forest clearing, and it's from this base that he compulsively reads and writes. Black River is the 3rd book in his To the Moodysson series, along with Dark Pines and Red Snow. Now let's tell you about Johana. Born in Marseille, France, and with a degree in political science, Johana Gustawsson has worked as a journalist for the French and Spanish press and television. Her award-winning Roy and Castell series includes Block 46, Keeper, and Bloodsong, and is now published in 19 countries. That's a lot, Johana. That's really impressive. A TV adaptation is currently underway in a French, Swedish, and UK co-production. Johana lives in London with her Swedish husband and their 3 sons. So welcome, Will and Johana.
Thank you.
My first question is slightly obvious, because we're talking about Nordic Noir or Scandi Noir, which is a bit more for you guys. But obviously, I've probably given it away a little bit there in the bio, but Will, you're British, Johana, you're French. How do you end up writing Scandi Noir? Let's start with Johana.
Well, I think that it might be the same thing for the two of us. I don't know, Will, but I think it's the fault of our spouses. It's because of them.
It's all their fault.
It's all their fault. I think for me, I'm a girl from the south. I mean, I'm born in Marseille with the Catalan origins and roots. Never ever I thought I would go for a salmon eater, as my French would say when I met my husband. So that was a big surprise. But what I found, I didn't know much. I was a big traveler always, but I didn't know anyone from Scandinavia. So it was really when I got to dive into the culture, all the how do you say that in English? All the ideas, the ideas I had about that culture, that you associate the weather with the temperament of people, was totally wrong. They're extremely warm people, and they welcomed me absolutely wonderfully. And the first time I went there was in 2005, so 15 years ago. And it was basically 2 months after meeting my husband, and he took me to Sweden to spend the New Year's Eve. And I arrived there in Falkenberg, actually, so where my series is taking place, and he takes me to a walk in the little harbor. And I looked at that place and I thought, God, this is a perfect place to bury a body. I mean, the silence around. And of course, I didn't share my thoughts straight away. 2 months in with the guy, I didn't want to scare him to death, you know? But I told him afterwards. And I think that's how it started. It was a love story that started with death, basically. Because everywhere I'm going, I want to bury bodies. But that's how we came. I think it's my husband who brought in that, how do you say, that idea, and also, I mean, the landscape are breathtaking. I mean, it's to describe that, to try to get into that atmosphere. There is a stillness around that huge land. I don't have the numbers, but the numbers of people, maybe Will knows, I don't know, the numbers of people living per how do you call that, square kilometer, you say in English, is very small. So I mean, you people have lots of space, and that feeling, I mean, for me as a French, when we very often cramped, and I mean, it's a whole atmosphere, I think, that you create. So that's how it came to me, all by the husband. And the mother-in-law.
And is that the same for you, Will?
Yeah, but much less exotic and high class. Like, I'm not from the south of France. I'm from the East Midlands, little market town, and I didn't come to Falkenberg, which is, I think, one of my favorite places in the whole of Sweden. This beautiful coastal town with incredible beaches for kind of kite surfing and that kind of thing. Unfortunately, my wife wasn't from there. She's from further north, where it's just a lot of moose and dark forests, which is where I'm talking to you from now. So similar kind of story. I came over for the first time in 98 with her, and I was just a fresh-faced country boy joke of 18, 19 years old. And I was just overwhelmed by Sweden, by the nature, by the wilderness. It's one of the few remaining true wilderness areas in Europe. And just the fact that there are wolves and there are moose and there are wolverines, it's crazy. It's just blew my mind. It still does. I live here off grid in the middle of a huge forest now. And I saw 2 moose on Sunday. One in the morning, I saw a big bull elk in the morning. And in the evening, I saw a cow elk. And then I just met my neighbor before talking to you guys, and he shot an elk this morning. This is the start of the moose hunt right now. That stuff doesn't happen in the Midlands. So it was just, I was just very captivated by this place. And I moved here full time like 8 years ago, and I love it, and I have to write about it.
So let's hear a bit more about your books then. So Johana, tell us a bit more about Emily Roy and Alex Casals.
Yes, well, when it was when I wanted to basically create a world around Sweden, the first thing I did, to be honest, it was really to look at the way my life was at the time. I was still working as a journalist, and I was very, as I was mentioning before, very European girl with some roots in Spain and in France, and a husband who was Swedish, and living in London. And I thought that there are so many things that I wanted to talk about. And the first thing was kind of that may be a violent word, but the clash of the culture, the ice and the fire. The fire would be people from the south. We are hot-blooded. We talk with the hands, as you can see me, and Scandinavians are very quiet and very calm, and and that's how everything started. It was, for me, desire to talk about lots of things, and at the same time, my passion for history. Because my thrillers are partly historical, and each because for the moment there are 3 Royan castles, and the first one was diving partly in the Second World War in the concentration camp of Buchenwald. The second one is in Jack the Ripper, London, And the third one, Blood Song, is about is diving into the years of Spanish dictatorship, a dictator with the dictatorship of Franco. And Emily Roy and Alexis Castells are a team, but very different women. You have Emily Roy, who is a profiler, who is, she's not a social animal at all, yet a very good and fine psychologist. She is a profiler, and she helps, she works for Scotland Yard, but she's Canadian of origin. And we have Alexis Castells, who is Catalan from origin, but she is a true crime writer, and she lives in London. And I get lots of questions, is that you? And I say, well, I wish she's tall, brunette with blue eyes, and she has no kids. So I wish that would be me, Alexis Castells. But and that's how basically I started with them. And maybe we'll talk about that later, but Block 46 started with the story of my grandfather. So there is a lot of family history in my books.
Yeah, I definitely want to come back to you about the Spanish bit in a little bit later. So Will, tell us a bit more about Tuva Moodyson and what she's up to in Black River.
Okay, so the Tuva Moodyson books, just to give you a quick overview, are kind of these creepy, claustrophobic small town mysteries set in the center of Sweden, in Värmland, where it really is a lot more wild than where I live. There are more wolves there. You're getting into bear territory up there. And the settlements, the towns are very far apart. So there's this inherent kind of danger, and there's a lot of darkness there in the wintertime. The first Tuva book, Dark Pines, was all about the hunting culture. The second, Red Snow, set in the middle of winter when it's -25, -30, that was all about licorice and a Gothic licorice factory with a lot of weird history. And the third one, Black River, can I show it to you really quickly?
Yeah, I've got this copy. Is it the same? Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So this one is set over midsummer, which is this weird. Joanna will know all about this.
Yes, weird.
It is weird, right? It's this fever dream time of year where it doesn't get dark. Where I live, it gets dark, like a little bit dark for a couple of hours. But where Tuva is, it doesn't get dark at all in midsummer. And it's just this very strange, pagan, visceral time of year where there's a lot of fires and a lot of, kids and adults alike dance around the kind of fertility pole like frogs, and they drink a lot and they sing, and it's this Viking weirdness mixed with pagan, mixed with Christianity. It's very odd and disconcerting as a foreigner to be here at that time of year. And I set Black River in that period, and there's a missing persons investigation. So Tuva, who I should explain a little bit, Tuva Moodyson is a young deaf reporter. So she's a journalist. She's terrified of nature, and I've put her in the center of this awful rural hillbilly town, and with like 2 cops and 1 bar and 1 supermarket. It's very Twin Peaks, if you get that vibe, that kind of strange, surreal, claustrophobic vibe. Twin Peaks meets Fargo meets Northern Exposure meets Broadchurch. There's a lot of potential suspects for everything that goes wrong. And in Black River, Tuva's best friend in the world goes missing. So Tuva has to do what she hates to do, which is to go into these small villages and these forests to interview people, interview a lot of very odd suspects, and find out what's happened to her best friend.
Yeah, when I read it, I was thinking, finally we reached summer. We reached decent temperatures when you're not putting, and that's the thing I loved about Red Snow, was all the layers Tuva had to put on before she could go out anywhere. And I think, brilliant. And then I read it and go, no, I still don't want to go to Sweden. Because there's even more insects than there are, in October for, Dark Pines. And it's just like, and then there's all these weird things going on, and then there's suddenly fog. And just like, it's just still not making me feel like I really want to go there just yet.
It's lovely here, honestly.
I don't know, it is. Maybe I'll stick to the cities. Maybe I'll go to Stockholm or something. Or Falkenberg, during there. So you've already talked about Midsummer, which I want to talk about. That's why you've done that. So Johana, I'd love to know a little bit more about the Spanish side of things, because I think the thing that really intrigued me most about the Spanish parts, because that was actually my favourite parts of Blood Song, was the Spanish bits. And I sort of learned a bit about the Civil War, A-level history, but you don't really go beyond that when you do history. It sort of stops, and we kind of forget that although Franco was then in power, there were still Republicans, and they still were treated incredibly badly, and that's what you look into, and in particular women and children. So just tell us a bit more about that.
Yes, well, it's the same grandfather who basically fought into the Second World War just before. He was just a wood carver, but he was a humanist and a communist. But before anything, he was a humanist. And when the Spanish Civil War started, he decided in 1936 to go in Spain because his father was Spanish. But he was living in Marseille, in south of France, and he decided to go to Spain and to fight there. And that is a part of the family history I always wanted to talk about. But I always heard lots of stories, because I have part of my family living in a very small village in Spain, close to Valencia, when I have lots of cousins. And my parents always told me stories of the time of Franco. But for me, it always felt long time ago, until I was maybe 15, 16, and I got interested into it, and I realized that it was basically until 75, that until he died, that there was a dictatorship in Spain. And what happened, which was absolutely horrible, was that the death of that dictator, left and right in Spain decided to shake hands and say, let's forget about everything. Let's forget about the millions of deaths of the people who still don't know where are their fathers or sons, or people have spent their life in jail during 36 years. And basically, they decided to wipe out history and not to talk about this. And that makes it still now, some people are suffering from the after effect of things that have been happening in the 30s. Because what Franco started, we talked a lot about what happened in South America, about the stolen babies. Well, that happened, the stolen babies happened in Spain until the end of the 80s. So they were still stealing babies, and there are still people who don't know who are their real parents, people who are younger than me. So it's absolutely insane. And when I started doing my research, because I do a huge amount of research for that part of the historical part, and I had to go through testimonies of women who were basically jailed. And what was awful is that you realize that what happened during the Franco years, in 1936, when they started basically having prisoners, the dictator and what we call the blue shirts, we call them, when they were making prisoners, they started putting them in transporting them the way that Nazis will transport the prisoners by train. Later, Nazis were inspired by Franco to start with. And basically what I read about the jails, the jails of the dictatorship, were just as horrible and inhumane as what happened during the Second World War in the concentration camp. But the world doesn't know, despite the fact that Spain they're our neighbors. And so it was extremely cruel dictatorship that went on for almost 4 decades, and that changed the face of Spain completely. People were not allowed to speak their how do you say, native tongue, which was what we call the regional tongues, which are not their proper languages. They were killed because they were talking to the wrong person. A proper dictatorship with people who were wiped out. There are people we don't know where they disappeared. We don't know how. And I wanted to focus on women and children, because very often in the war, women are doing their own war by, how would I put that? In a more, with more silence. And they're the little ants that work behind the scenes, and their resistance and their heroes. And I wanted to talk about them, and to talk about them giving birth in jail, and being separated from their children, and also the after effect of what a dictatorship can create, because you have resilient people, but you also have people who are not resilient at all and who become monsters. So that's what war and dictatorship create. And it's basically following all those stories, because the big history with the big H is made of all the little stories of everyone. So that's what I got interested in.
Yeah, I found that those were incredibly moving and powerful parts of the book. I mean, we have the whole story as well of there is someone out killing in Sweden, but I'm always intrigued as to how you're going to link those historical bits in, and they always do eventually. They're like, oh, that's how you've done it. But yeah, so I found that bit really, really amazing. Well, what I'd like to know is, why do you think Scandi Noir is so popular? Because it's not just, you've been writing, obviously Scandi Noir as a genre is incredibly popular. What do you think it is that draws people to it?
I don't know. I don't even know if I'm qualified to answer this question, because Johanna and I are both kind of fake Scandi Noir authors, right? We're not that authentic. So it's difficult to tell. I mean, the thing that draws me as a reader to Scandi Noir, to some parts of Scandi Noir, is the way that the way that writers of Scandi Noir often are very good at kind of getting into the depths of the culture and kind of uncovering secrets. I like the way that the intrinsic kind of darkness and low population density means that as a fiction writer, you can bring up secrets and deep-rooted secrets and grudges and things, and it's realistic, because there is, as humans, we're very attracted to this idea that it doesn't get light and that you can hide things, because there aren't people everywhere, there aren't police everywhere. You know, where I live, I never see police. I see a police car maybe once every 4 months. That's it. In the local town, there's just no police here. It's very different. It's similar to kind of Canada and places like that, I guess, in parts of Russia. Like, people are just left to get on with it. And there's not a lot of government involvement in everyday life, in rural Sweden at least. And that lends itself to crazy things can happen. Stories can develop, and legacies can exist over generations that nobody really finds out about from the outside. And I like that kind of that setup in Scandi Noir. There's lots of different types of Scandi Noir. I mean, for example, I love, one of my early favorite books was Miss Miller's Feeling for Snow by Peter Hög. And then in that book, I love a lot of things about that book, but especially the language around snow and the language around the weather and the nature. That's another thing Scandi writers do brilliantly well, is having the nature as kind of an underlying character of the stories, which I love, because the nature here is huge and kind of overwhelming, and it's involved in everyday life.
Yeah, and I think maybe also perhaps the weather is so dramatically different at different times of the year that really sort of feeds into that. That was the thing I loved about Red Snow, was that I really felt cold, and I think I even read it in the summer, but I actually felt cold reading it, because of the way that you were able to describe it, and just it's literally the silly amount of layers you have to put on to survive those ridiculous temperatures.
And it is a survival thing. Like, you know, I said to my wife after we lived in the woods for a few years, you know, if I go out, I didn't have a dog at the time. I've got a dog now. I'll just show you the dog really quickly. He's here.
Is the dog there?
I went out for a walk in the forest. I have my phone with me, then I would last like, I don't know, not very long if I haven't got the right gear on, if it's minus 25 or minus 28 degrees. So there is that intrinsic risk to life, that danger that comes from the weather. And I find weather here really interesting. My wife doesn't. Like, she'll read my manuscript and be like, yeah, it's minus 27. What's the big deal? It's just, it doesn't get light. It's just the way it is. And for me, it's just, I want to write about it because it's interesting to me.
By the way, if anyone's watching us, if you want to put some questions in the comments, we'll try and pick those up, and we'll do that. Oh, I think we may have some. I know. Sorry. Okay, Phil's going to ask me something, but I can't do it now.
Joy,
right,
just to say, I love the flag in your background.
Thank you.
For doing that.
I apologise that we didn't iron it first. I bought in February, ready for our event in March, and then of course we didn't happen. But that's fine because you were not well, and it's just as well you didn't come back. So I think then, because then we ordered. So let me just check. Are you completely better? 100% better? Well,
yeah, 100%. I got better fairly quickly, so I'm fine. I think I caught whatever I caught. I still don't know because there was no testing back in late February, but I caught it in New York or Heathrow. So it could have been the thing. It could have been something different. I don't know, but I'm fine now. Thank you. Good.
Yeah. So I was saying before, was anyone who wants to ask Will and Johana a question, pop it into the comments on YouTube, and we will endeavour to see if we can see it. I mean, I won't be able to see it. Someone else will have to see it and come and tell me. But that's what we will try and do. Okay, I'm just looking where I've got up to in my So I'd like to know, in particular, Will, I'm going to come back to you for a moment. Because I've heard you talk about this before, so tell us how you created Tuva Moodyson.
So Tuva kind of came to me like a thunderbolt. It's a kind of a cliche, but she kind of came to me fully formed, the whole character. So I visualize my stories before I write them. I don't really plot very well. I'm rubbish at plotting. I don't really plan things very well, but I try and visualize as much of the story as I can before I start writing a first draft. Like every night before I go to sleep, I'm thinking through the story, and it starts to kind of crystallize and become more real to me before I start writing it. And Tuva came to me because I saw this vast forest in my mind's eye. And I zoomed in a little bit, and I saw this gravel track snaking through the trees. And I zoomed in, I saw a pickup truck. And then in my mind's eye, I looked through the driver's side window, and I saw a young woman with hearing aids. And who knows how that happened? Like, who knows why that vision came to me or why she had hearing aids, but she did. And then I started to kind of think about what that would be like, and what she, her kind of disappointments and hopes and aspirations living in a small town when she really wants to live in London or Tokyo or Stockholm, and what motivates her as a person, what her relationships are like in the small town, her relationship with her mother, things like that. So that's how I start to kind of flesh out a character, is I just kind of visualize them going around their day-to-day life. And I was just lucky with Tuva because when I started writing the first draft of Dark Pines, her voice just flooded out of me. Like, it was really natural and fun to write. I got a buzz writing her, and I enjoyed writing her, which I think, it's the same for Johana. If you're writing a series, you need to have fun with that character, and you need to learn about them a little bit more in every book, and they need to challenge you in some way. And I don't understand Tuva properly yet. I haven't figured her out. So I really enjoy writing her growing older. She's in her late 20s now, and I really enjoy finding things out through writing her.
Excellent. And Johana, we have Emily Roy and Alex Castells. I don't know if I said that correctly. I'd love to know in particular why Emily is Canadian.
Well, it all started, it's what Will said, that I was nodding and nodding because it's so true that we need to really enjoy writing, for our characters. And I'm exactly like Will. I haven't figured out Emily yet completely, but she's Canadian because I wanted her to speak basically. It's totally opportunistic. I wanted her to speak French and English. And, the start of all the profiling was really in Canada. they were the Royal Mounted Police were the one who really created lots of very important tools for the profiling. Of course, the American in the 80s, late 80s, were the one who started with the behavioral bureau, but the I thought I'm gonna make her from Quebec, so that she has that French heritage, and at the same time she can speak English, and she can come and work for Scotland Yard and be in London, because I wanted to talk about that city that became my city, London, and it's for Emily. There is a French expert, a French true crime writer. He's called Stéphane Bourgoin, and I read years back a book about the aunt of Oscar Pistorius, that Paralympic, how do you say, Paralympic, how do you say that? That disabled, yes. Yes, was accused of murdering his girlfriend in South Africa, and that aunt was the most famous profiler, was still is in South Africa. She was called Mickey Pistorius. Now she's not working anymore, but she was very famous in the 90s. And I read a book about her, about how she was a bit mystic in the way she was seeing things. She was feeling the serial killers, and he was a bit mystic the way she was seeing things, but she was getting to results. She was a psychologist, obviously, a trained profiler, but in the 90s she was she arrested a number of serial killers. I mean, in South Africa, they have per capita the how do you say, the most prolific killers, and she really inspired me. And a few years after, I saw an interview from her, and I couldn't believe how she looked like. She looked like a proper English teacher with a big bow, and she had a very small voice. And she was talking like that. And I was like, that's the fierce profiler? This is insane. And basically, I started dreaming about Emily Roy, and that's how I started writing about her. And the only thing I had in my mind is I just was seeing her very petite and very muscular, but she didn't even have a face, but she had a voice. She had a voice and a character. She was very, I felt that she was that kind of person who was getting into a room, and she was filling that room with her aura and her presence. So that's how she was born, my Canadian lady.
That makes a lot of sense, because I find that she's a bit of an enigma, and you just can't work out who she is or anything, whereas Alexis is much more, she's completely, as you said, French, Spanish, and it's just everything out there to be seen all the time. But yes, so and then what I'm thinking in particular is that you have then, Johana, you then have lots of different sort of protagonists sort of telling the story, whereas Will just goes simply with two there. So Johana, why did you go just with that? Why did you have lots of different protagonists speaking?
To be honest, I didn't think when I started writing the book, I mean, so Block 46 for the first one, I just knew that there would be, first of all, 3 narrative strands, because that's the only thing I knew. I knew that I would talk about the investigation, which is happening nowadays with Block 46, the disappearance of little boys, the murder of little boys who are found in Hampstead Woods. And then there is a narrative strand happening in the 40s with the Buchenwald concentration camp. And then I wanted to be with a serial killer. So that's the only thing I knew. I knew that there would be kind of 3 stories that would merge into one. But for the investigation, when we have all those different points of view, I just didn't think. I just started writing my story. And then there was Emily's voice, and then there was Alexi, and then there was the Swedish investigator. And then it just came out of me that way. I don't know how to put it. And then basically the tone was set for the series, because then you need to leave the voice to the same people throughout the series. And I really enjoyed that, because I could get into different personalities, into different shoes. I could suddenly become Olofsson, who is so politically incorrect and so he's such a macho, and I just wanted to slap his face, and I just enjoyed that so much. And at the same time with Alexi, who is much more light, and Emily, who is still I cannot figure her out. So I really think I just got into the writing process, and I didn't think. Now that I'm starting a new series, or a new standalone, that's what I'm doing now. I know that I've been thinking much more which voice I'm gonna take, and to change a little bit the experience, and to learn as well as a writer.
And so for Will, you have Tuva, and you just see everything through Tuva, which is how I prefer to write actually as well. So why did you choose to just stick with her?
I don't know. I'm in awe of Johana to write multiple strands and weave them together and have a historical element. I'm not that smart, and I like simple books that are written in a chronological way. I think there's nowhere to hide. Every word, every sentence has to work, has to earn its place on the page. I like the fact that if it's very simple, it has to be all be worthwhile. And a lot of my favorite books are just very simple. They're little kind of acorns. They're just or like an egg. They're just perfect. They're just one simple thing. Like if you look at The Road by Cormac McCarthy, which is my favorite book, it's one point of view, the father, throughout the whole book, and they just walk along a road. Like that's the book. I love that. I absolutely love it. And my crime novels or my novels are the same. It's just the Tuva books are Tuva's point of view. You get deep into her psychology, into her head. And I like the fact that the reader sees the world through Tuva's eyes. It's a very powerful kind of experience. It's the same as me writing Tuva, and I stay in Tuva's head for the whole month that I write the first draft. And if you read the book, it's the same kind of thing. You're living it, and you're feeling it, and you're afraid of the same things that Tuva is afraid of. And I just like that intimacy and that immediacy, and that the kind of the power of that kind of simple storytelling.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I have tried to write multiple viewpoints, and I didn't get very far. So yeah, I think you have to plan it quite well, and really sort of know a bit more about your characters. Now I'm going to try and see. I've got some questions here.
Can I just butt in? Can I just butt in really quick? Because what Johana said is so true, that you said something about the fact that we're all learning, and we have to kind of get out of our comfort zone. And I really believe that. So I'm going to try and do this one day. It might not be for like 15 years, but one day I want to try and write multiple points of view or flashbacks or something more complicated. I think I really agree with you that you have to get out of your comfort zone as a writer.
Yeah, definitely. Right, I'm going to try and read my daughter's handwriting here. So this is for Johana, and I think this is from, looks like Joe in New York. Wow, we've reached New York. I'm impressed. So if we've reached anywhere else, let's see. So say, are there parts of present day society that have parallels for her research of World War II era and Franco regime that spark a similar interest in exploring about, and writing, I'm not quite sure what my daughter's written here. I think, is there anything happening now that's sort of a similar sort of thing to World War II and Franco that actually might spark your interest, that you think you might include in a story at some point? I think that's what that question is saying as I've been trying to read it.
I think there are plenty of things happening that can spark, interest. I think what is very worrying is that we see that what has been happening in the past keeps on repeating itself, like the not in the same way, but I think humans have their flow and they have their fears, and fear makes you do stupid things and dangerous ones, the fear of the other, the fear of the stranger. And so I think that for the moment, no, I had some parts of the history that I've always wanted to talk about. And of course, as I had children at the same time as I was writing, and it takes me so long to do my research, it took me 2 years for every book. And the one that I have now that I'm working on, I dived into even more far away. I mean, the beginning of the 20th century in France during the Belle Époque, which is basically just before the first war. So I seem to be diving more and more in the past. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know what I will do. I mean, lots of authors have very clever plans about what they will do next. I'm unable to do that. I think one book at the time. And now I'm deep down into black masses, witchery, and yes, and that time, and I don't know. I suppose that anything that nowadays could spark my interest, and that is also about the comfort zone. It's just that I have such a big interest into history that I always want to dive into it, because I love to explain the why. Why would a serial killer or a killer kill? What happened? And I believe in psychogenealogy. So I think that what our parents did have an impact on our behavior. Doesn't make us killer, but it will imprint on who we are and how our parents reacted. And maybe one day I won't dive into history, and I will look at nowadays, and yes, maybe, I don't know. But for the moment, yes, as I said, it's I think that yeah, I think that I'm trying to think if I had some ideas recently, because of course I read the news, but I tend to always dive far back. Maybe I had a reader who told me one day, maybe you had plenty of past lives, you just want to revisit them. God knows, I don't know, but I'm very attracted by history, what it was before, which explains who we are now.
I think William Ryan once said, and he did an event for us, but he and Susie Holiday did our very first event 2 years ago, and he was talking about history, and he said the wonderful thing about writing historical fiction is that we already know what's happened. So although you are tied to that a little bit, at the same time, you know how it's worked out. And so it's not like writing it now where you're not quite sure what's going to happen. And I think maybe that's what's useful for you, and is that you know what's happened, and then you can then tie that in with
and it's observing as well, to trying to understand. I think that history explain the making of the people. It really explain why Catalans were behaving in a certain way now, is because of the Franco years. Is because of what they've been going through, and I found that fascinating. And I come from a family of psychologists, so the why has always been part of my upbringing. So maybe that's why.
I've got another question here for Will. Actually, this ties in with something that I wanted to ask as well. So I'm not too sure who said this, but if you ever want to go back and look and see. So your next novel, which I also want to talk about, The Last Thing to Burn, is a standalone. what has inspired you to move away from Tuva for a while? And my question to you is, tell us a little bit about it, because I've read it and it's outstanding.
Thank you very much. I don't know. I like Johana. I don't have a master plan of what I'm going to write in the future. I'm just lucky that I think I have like an idea and a half a year ish. And that's just, thank goodness for that. Thank goodness I don't have an idea every 10 years. But The Last Thing to Burn is quite a different book to the Tuva novels. It's more simple. Again, it's even more stark. It's set in the East Midlands, in the fens, in the kind of the vast flatlands, the most open landscape of all. And it's a tiny farmhouse. It's set on a tiny farmhouse, tumble down farmhouse on a marginal farm. And there's a farmer there and he's holding a woman captive. That is the entire book. The entire book is written from her point of view. And it's about how she deals with the day-to-day of being captive on this farm with this very bad man, and how she copes and how she deals with that. And that's the setup. It's been likened to Misery by Stephen King and Room by Emma Donoghue, and it's just a very claustrophobic, tight little intense story. And it came to me in one night. Actually, it came to me around midnight about 3 years ago. I was lying in bed, and again, it's a very visual thing. I saw this extremely flat landscape, this huge fields where I'm from. I'm very familiar with these massive, spooky fields when there's nobody there, and dikes and roads. And I saw this little farmhouse, and I saw this woman there, and she couldn't leave. So I imagine this woman being there. She could not leave. There's no boundaries in this landscape. There are no fences or walls. There's no barbed wire fence. There's nothing physical there stopping her leaving, but she cannot leave. And I wanted to know what was her story. How come she cannot leave? And then for the next 6 hours that morning, from 12 till 6 a.m., I came up with the entire book. I visualized the entire storyline. And then at 6 a.m., my wife woke up and I told her, I've had an idea. And so that was like a few years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, when I had the idea. And then I've been writing it just when I've had like a moment on a plane or doing publicity for the Tuva books. And then, yeah, I just feel very lucky that it will be published next January.
Yeah, I'm actually, it's very surprising to hear that that's how you've written it, because I know that when you do Tuva, you're there for a month and you get your first draft down. So to be writing it in little sections.
No, sorry. I was misleading. I wrote it in a month. I wrote it in 3 weeks, the first draft.
Okay.
So I did the same thing. I have a kind of a period leading up to a first draft where I'm just doing a lot of research and thinking and visualizing. And then I wrote the first draft in 3 weeks without any time off, just constantly being in the main character's head. And then I put it away for 6 months. Then I come back to it. And what I meant was when I came back to it and I tinker with it and I rewrite and I edit it myself, that I can do whenever I have a bit of time. But the first draft, yeah, I have this weird method writing thing. Very unhealthy. It's pretty very crazy doing it. It's not. Yeah, I don't know. My wife doesn't think so.
Well, she knows it's like a month and that's it, kind of thing.
That's true.
But yeah, I can imagine that. Imagine for that month she's kind of parenting alone and just not really.
Well, the thing is that I'm in Sweden. I'm a Swedish citizen now, so I'm trying to be a modern man. So I'm doing all the things I need to do. I'm picking up my kid. I'm cooking. I'm doing all this stuff, but I'm not really there mentally. Like I'm not present for that month. So I tick the boxes. I do the things I need to do. I'm not some kind of ogre who just says I'm not seeing the kid for a month. Like I have to do the things, but I'm not present at all.
Okay, well, we're sort of coming up towards the end. We've been talking nearly almost an hour. I'm just having a look, see what else we've got here. Actually, I want to know as well, Johana, what language do you write in? Do you write in French?
Yes, I do. I write in French, and I swear in Spanish, but I write in French.
So the thing that you're working on now, let's just talk about that for a moment. That's a standalone?
I don't know yet. I have no idea. This is how far it goes. So no, I don't know. I was supposed to write Roy and Castell's number 4, and then as I was progressing in the story, because I do like Will, I think a lot, doing quite a bit. I plot because I have to with a different story, but storyline. But I think a lot. And when the characters, just the story came, I was like, this is not for Emily Roy. This is not. So it's going to be happening in Quebec, actually, and in a village that does not exist, but is happening. That is happening. I'm mixing French and English now. That is called La Clarence, and it starts with a woman who's just found. She's the teacher of the village, and she's found on the porch of her home, covered in blood. And the police is called, and there it starts. And at the same time, we're going to follow 2 other stories. One of a woman who is living in 1911 in Paris, and who's just lost her 2 daughters in the fire of her house. And we're going to follow also at the same time in 1971 in Quebec, in La Clarence, the story of a teenager who is basically forced to follow her mom at work. And her mom is working in an old people's home, and she's going to meet that old lady who's going to become really important in her life. So there we go, but we're going to be in Quebec mostly.
Wow, that sounds amazing. Someone has just wants to know how Bernie is. I think because there's him, but the internet went out for a bit. I think it did at my end as well, so maybe it was your end. We just didn't see him. I don't know if he's still in with you.
Let's see if I can. Can you see him there?
Well,
oh my goodness, this is huge. Are you going to teach? Are you going to teach him
He's
to
90
pull a
kilograms.
sledge?
Yeah, he's gonna have a barrel of whiskey around his neck. He's already hauling out firewood for me. Like if I chop down a tree and slice it up into chunks, he'll take a chunk and drag it, and he loves working. So he's a good boy. He's only 14 months old. Everybody thinks he's a full-size dog, but he's just a baby.
Oh. Well, there he is. And is Monty still all right? Monty's not being put out. Monty's your cat, very big cat.
Monty's great. He gives the dog a wide berth, and this is a big Norwegian forest cat, and he basically comes to us when Bernie goes to sleep, so it's fine. It works out well. Yeah, thank you.
Oh well, thank you so much. I just got now. It's 8:30 here, which means it's 9:30 for Will. But thank you so much for your time, and thank you for coming when 7 months ago. We suddenly had to have it cut short and we couldn't see you, and it's so lovely that you've been able to come now and tell us about your books. And so thank you, and thank you to Sarah and Phil, who are still kind of on the call but not on the call. If you see, yeah, it didn't quite work out and get rid of them completely, but there you go. We've got a date ready for our next event, which will be next month, Monday the 23rd of November, when by popular demand, I think, we are having back 2 authors who are our second event when we started this. We are having Amma Anwar and Rod Reynolds come back to talk about their new books. And this time we're not having UK versus US noir, we're having London calling, because Rod has realised that he really should be basing his books in London. So we're going to be talking about those books on the 23rd of November, and I guess we will probably do it on YouTube again rather than on Facebook. So thank you, Will. Thank you, Johana.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joy. Thank you.
Particularly when it's so hot, we can't actually physically see you, but it's so nice to see you on Zoom.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, and thank you to everyone that's been watching. Just a very quick plug as well. Will has a channel on YouTube. It's Will Dean, Forest author. He has lots of wonderful videos on there about writing and about how to get an agent, and lots of different things. I've watched them and they've been incredibly helpful. So if you are writing and you want to find out a bit more, check out Will's channel, and you can get some helpful hints from him. Okay, thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.